Welcome back to the Student Hub Live STEM Showcase. We have had an amazing morning so far, learning about the various ways which science, technology, engineering and mathematics students can engage with teaching and learning at the Open University. And in this session, we take a special look at the OpenSTEM Labs, which we've been hearing about and visiting throughout the day. And I'm joined by Nick Braithwaite, who is the Associate Dean for Academic Excellence and is often in one of the various STEM labs. But Nick, today you're going to tell us about some of the remote access and also to explain more broadly how all of these various labs linked together.
Yes, OK. Can we get the slide up that we
yes,
had
let's have
that
a
shows
look
the overall
at the OpenSTEM
framework
Labs. OK.
Yeah. So the idea is that if you'd been on a conventional campus, there would have been a laboratory building. There'd have been a place to go to. And I see we've got the slide showing now, and that building is the outer boundary there where it says the OpenSTEM Labs. But it's not a real building, it's a virtual building. But it's still got the same mindset. If you're on a campus, you go to the labs, you'd have your notebook, and this would be the lab session. You'd be devoting time to that. It's not a lecture, it's a time for implementing some of the learning and doing a little bit of discovery by doing. So that's why we call it the OpenSTEM Labs. Open because it's the Open University, and STEM for obvious reasons, and labs because it is learning by doing. Within that, it's as if it were a real building. We've got different floors, if you like, and one of them is labelled the Open Science Laboratory. That was actually the first one we commissioned. And then we've got the Open Science Observatories, we've got the Open Engineering Laboratory, and we have on-campus labs. So we've blurred the boundary. It goes seamlessly from the real world into the virtual world. And right now, on campus, we've got some STEM students doing laboratory skills work in the on-campus labs. And right now we have available, but the modules, it's about time for getting modules around, but we have available to students some of our activities from the Open Engineering Lab. They're still accessible to students.
Brilliant. And we've just seen in that previous video some of the virtual labs as well.
Yes, that's right. The virtual and real, it's again a bit of a blur. The hallmark of what we do, the real key to it, is that it is real data and an authentic interface. Sometimes that data can be got from the archives. For example, if you'd scanned a slide for a microscope at very high resolution, you can then bring it out of the archive and people can see different parts of the slide at high resolution, or the entire slide, we can downsample it. So that we would call a virtual laboratory experience. But then you could have a real microscope, and I can show you examples of both of those in just a moment. So
no, that would be amazing. Because I hear you were talking to Sam Jima and showing him about how the Open University teaches STEM.
Yes.
And what was his response?
Well, he's nicely blown away by it. He gets what we're doing, I think. He in one speech earlier on, he talked about some universities having an uncanny knack at being at the forefront, slightly ahead of the game, and he was referring to some of the things that we've been doing in STEM and in the OpenSTEM Labs in particular. We also, let me just begin by saying, this was on Monday, we went down to his office. He wanted to talk to some Open University students. Normally he visits a campus. How do you visit the Open University campus if you want to find students? Because this is the one place where they're thin on the ground.
Yeah.
So we said, let's do an Adobe Connect session. And we found 8 students to connect to him. And we had an associate lecturer coordinating a conversation. And there he was at his desk, actually with my very laptop here, just looking at the photographs of the students, talking to the students, engaging them, asking them questions such as, what would you do if you had my job for the day?
What did they say?
I thought you might ask me
yeah.
that. I think some of them thought that it would be rather fun, and they were very keen to ensure that people knew about the Open University, people knew about the opportunities of the Open University. And so they do things, and they were encouraging this in other things, they would do things to try to raise the awareness at the time when people are beginning to make decisions or beginning to explore whether or not it's for them. And there were some nice stories amongst those particular students about how it was that they'd come across the Open University. And some of it was really quite chance stuff, but once we got the hook in, once they saw what we were at, then we realised we were for each other. But just at the beginning, we maybe have to do a little bit more to push ourselves out there and get seen. But overall, Sam loved it, and he particularly liked it. I showed him one of the things on here, one of the applications on here, and he was itching to get his fingers on the keyboard and start controlling what we were seeing. And so.
Well, let's take a look, Nick.
Yes, let's do that. Let's see if I've got the very one here. Look, I showed him this one.
Okay.
Which is a picture of a skull. I'll just make sure the brightness is up there. This is a picture of a skull. Now I should be able to probably zoom in a little bit somehow. I can turn it, there we are, I can turn it around. It's as if I'm holding it in my hand. And I think if I, wait a minute, there we are, if I zoom in, it's a bit fast there, I can get up close to it. Now I should be able, possibly, I might want to compare that with another one. So now I've got two skulls and I can rotate them side by side. This is an example of what we would call virtual. So this is a virtual experiment. These are real skulls. We've scanned them, we've taken the photographs and put them into this environment so that students can do things with these as if they were in the lab at the bench with the real skull, able to do things like making measurements. So let me just see if I can demonstrate that.
I imagine this must be a lot easier in the sense of having something digital to measure. You must be able to get a lot more accurate data.
Yes, in principle, because we could make measurements from here, from that point on the skull to say this point here. That's going through the skull. That's not very good. It's probably better to go around the edge of the skull, just like you had a tape measure over the skull.
Yeah.
And you could possibly make more easily make an accurate measurement using this digitally, because we're measuring pixels along here and knowing in 3D where the object is. So it's better than a tape measure in actual fact. It's certainly easier than trying to hold a tape measure on and go around a skull. So in a sense, it's not a bad way to do it at all. Even if you had the real skull, you might want to digitize it so that you could do it this way. So we're not making compromises. We're trying to get better than the real thing. That's what we say. Virtually better than the real thing.
Because technology has enabled us to make so many changes, and really, you know, aside from being able to let anyone access some of this material and therefore get a lot of measurements of that data so that it's more reliable, you know, again, the opportunity to be able to do something like this where, you know, you couldn't get a skull and measure it in another, you know, institution very easily is accessible to our students.
Yes, that's right, and it's easy to add other skulls if we want. So this can only grow. It's not limited by number. In a conventional laboratory, you're limited by having maybe one or two skulls to look at and having to pass them around the group. Any number of people, more or less, can look at this at the same time, hundreds of people. It's been used in the S112 module by students already, and I'm looking forward to doing more things like this. I think this is one of the things I'd say, you know, we do this well. It's my colleagues who are doing it. It's not me that's doing it. I'm just demonstrating it here for you. Can I show you one or two other things?
Please do.
Okay, let's try this one. I mean, sometimes you just want to look at another example, looking at something, you just want to see it turn in front of you. So there's a little video that shows a piece of quartz here, and I can rotate it as if I had it in my hand. That's something that I quite like to do. But we can do better than that, because we can have other samples of quartz as well. I'll stop that going by choosing this one here, which is a look at a piece of amethyst. That's the purple material on here. I'm not a geologist. I may go out of my depth shortly, but I can zoom in on here as if I had it in my hand with a little magnifier, and I'm getting close in, and I'm seeing the shapes and the sizes of the crystals. I could do measurements on there. There are things labeled down here that says measure, and there'll be labels on there that you can put on. So we can make this a little bit smarter than the object itself, because we could tag various parts of it. We can draw people in. And we wouldn't just give this. I mean, you have to give this with a teaching narrative with some scaffolding. But so often in laboratory and practical work, in the conventional setting, people have got 3 hours. That's the lab time. They've got to come in. They've got to work through this list, do this, measure that, do this, write that down. We can be a little bit freer. I mean, we've still got issues about we don't want to take too much of people's time, so we have to help them. But there isn't that pressure. There isn't that pressure to get out by 5 o'clock. We're open 24/7. When it comes to being open, though, and doing things, you might want to be connecting to a real instrument. And I'm just wondering if this is a real instrument. No, it's not. This is the real instrument. This is a real microscope now. It's just down the corridor of this particular building as it happens. But, you know, it could be in Timbuktu for all the functionality matters here, because it's over the internet. There's a microscope slide there, and you can tell me you see nothing.
No.
So what's missing? There must be some light. If you don't put light on, you won't see anything. So I'll try putting the light on and hope that the microscope just needs to be just told.
Is this something that students have to book into? Is it something that?
Yes, for this one you would have to book.
Because you are making physical changes
to the microscope
down the corner.
To the microscope, and you just all I did then was to reboot the web page, because I've just changed which Wi-Fi connection I'm using as I came into the studio. So. It's tolerant of us doing silly things. It's just like the real world. You know, you can forget to put the light on, you can zoom in on the wrong bit. Real microscope, so zoom in, have a look at this. What is it? It's a plant stem. And this is looking down at the core of the plant stem, and further out, or I don't have to zoom out, I can just drag it out. I can go across to the edge of the plant stem. You'll see the curvature of the edge of the plant stem down here, and the different cells, the different structures. We can get right in as if we were there. We don't actually have to be next to the instrument anymore. And this is a thing that how life has changed. Although this microscope has got some tubes, and you take the specs off and look down the tubes like this, actually that's not how microscopes are used much these days. You put it on a screen and you interact with it on a screen.
Sarah said she really liked using the microscope in SDK 100.
And
the digital microscope.
We have a virtual version of this microscope, which I suspect is, if I click on that one over here, it's this one over here, and I can actually get the same slide if I'm careful. Yes, don't worry about that. It'll come on, run Adobe Flash. Allow. Real world, this is really happening, so we've got to be prepared to have to make decisions on the fly. Open a catalogue of plant tissue, and you see here, this looks very similar to what we were just looking at. It's slightly out of focus. Oh, I can make it worse. I'm very good at making focus worse.
Joanne said she loved some of these microscope activities, and Carol said she was doing the digital microscope in S111.
Right. Yes, well, this is what we would call a digital microscope. And if I just go across the slide there, you see the edge. Do you see the same features that we're seeing before? The cells changing as we go across the plant stem. It's actually a different plant stem, but it's a plant stem. This one, however, millions of people could look at the same time.
Right.
The other one, the real microscope down the corridor, you have to book a session.
Right.
So in order to scale that, we have to buy more microscopes. In order to scale this, we just invite the students to join. And we want to mix the two. You ought to be able to do the same things on this as you can do on the other. But while we're on microscopes, I get excited about the next thing I want to show you, which is this one here, which is the electron microscope. And this one here is showing a creature which last seen, apart from by me, by Sam Jima in his office. I got him to get up close to this. So let's see what he was looking at. Let's zoom in a little bit. I'm going to zoom in well, let's zoom in on this part here. See if we can ask people what we might be looking at there. So I just put a little mesh around it, and it should, if I've got this right. If not, I will have to, come on.
But the beauty of this is that you cannot break it, can you, Nick?
I haven't done yet. I haven't done yet. I've just had to reload that page because of the change I'd made earlier. Let's see if that gets it any more responsive. If it doesn't, there we are. Now it's done more or less what I wanted. I wanted it over there actually, so I can just drag it like that. This is happening now, just down the corridor from here. But again, it could be anywhere. Let's move it along a little bit more. The focus isn't so good, is it? Now, in the early days of microscopy, getting the focus just right was difficult. Electron microscopy, doubly difficult. And you go on courses for it. With software these days, all instruments are easier to drive. And this is the real world. So for our students, I want them to go to job interviews and to be asked questions like, Open University, I don't suppose you've ever used... Beautiful, isn't it? I don't suppose you've ever used an electron microscope. And I want to ask students, anybody listening now, use this one. I want you to look the interviewer in the eye and say, yes, haven't you? Of course we've been able to see one. Now, you've seen this program if you haven't used one for yourself. Now, this actually is a rice weevil.
Wow.
I know you were wondering what it was. It's a rice weevil on its back. This is probably the mouth end of it. I think that down here, it looks reminiscent of a fly's eye. And I'm no expert on these things, but I'm going to suggest that this is probably vestigial eye. There isn't a lot of rice. Sorry, there is a lot of rice. There isn't a lot of light in a bag of rice. So there isn't a lot of call for an eye. And so I suspect that we might have, you see the little facets in here, we might have something that once upon a time was an eye, or it might just be a genetically damaged eye. I'm getting it to focus in again, and there it is, getting nice and crisp.
Wow.
And what we're seeing, the structure that we're seeing, is using this electron microscope technology. The beauty of it is it goes to a very small scale. There's a scale bar at the bottom of the screen. I'll put my fingers representing that bar here. It says 90 micrometers. That's 1/100th, more or less 100th of a millimeter.
Wow.
No, wait a minute, let me get that right. 90, 100, it's a 10th of a millimeter, but for measurement, comparison purposes, always nice to have something familiar. So if I take a hair here, which I'm not going to pull out, there's not enough to go around.
We can imagine.
But, a human hair would occupy about 1/4 of that distance between my fingers now. 4 human hairs across there. So the hairs on a rice weevil are a tiny fraction of the hairs on a human.
Gosh, Nick, it's no wonder you've won awards for this.
Yes.
You and the team.
Yes. Okay, but perhaps I could tell you about those.
Yeah.
We've been fortunate over the years. We have here a Times Higher Education Award from 2014, which is Outstanding ICT Initiative. Then the Times Higher Education Leadership and Management Awards in 2017. That was really to do with the project that we had about the OpenSTEM Labs, about making live these experiments that people can come and use online. Then over here we have the Guardian Teaching Excellence Awards, which came at a really good time earlier this year in March, April time, I think it was. Yeah, it was probably April. And that was for what we call the delivery framework of this, which is the Internet of Laboratory Things. Like the Internet of Things, but the Internet of Laboratory things.
Yeah.
You're connecting to a computer, which is connected to an experiment, and it's real.
Excellent. Nick, it sounds incredibly exciting, and I love the way that students can actually get their hands on something like this and how easy it is to be able to use, I guess, once you know what you're looking for, and that's where the taught aspect comes into play, but also how reassuring that you're not going to break something and that you can have access, again, to a multitude of stimuli to look at.
Yeah, but that's an interesting point, because when we first started doing this with just the virtual experiments, talking to people from the Students' Association, a few years back now, I remember there was a nervousness being expressed about not liking to do this because we might break it.
Yeah.
And that was when it was entirely in the virtual world.
Wow.
Now we're connecting to the real world, so actually the prospect of breaking is a reality.
Yeah.
But that's for us to build in sufficient protections. We need these things to be able to run without technicians present all the time.
Yeah.
It needs to be fail-safe. And in a way, you know, I think it needs to be able to go wrong.
Yeah, yeah.
Because that's what happens in real life. We mustn't protect people from the truth. I don't want to hide things. I don't want to say, this is the bit to look at, go there now. Go and discover and explore that way. That is really what learning, for me, about experience, learning by experience. It has to do that. You have to be able to get there, to ask a what if I go too close to that? And sometimes I do go too close to things and I knock them over.
Yeah.
You know, that I say to students in the lab, if you haven't broken it, maybe you weren't using it hard enough.
Yeah.
So I don't mind if things get broken. Deliberate damage, don't
no,
like
no,
that.
no.
Willful damage, but I was just trying to find out more.
Yeah.
Is a reasonable.
And if you don't
excuse.
learn by mistakes, you don't learn. So
I think you learn more from mistakes, actually. Sometimes getting the right answer first time, you're not learning very much. You've really got to get it wrong, yes.
Brilliant. Well, Nick, thank you so much. And even virtual labs have to live somewhere. So we're going to take our audience on a tour of the campus now,
Right.
As we have a half-an-hour break. And then we'll be back live for our next session, where we're going to look at student support and careers and show you some of the team up in our Manchester office as well. So we're going to do a live link up to there. So I hope you enjoy the campus tour. Keep chatting. Thank you, Nick, for giving us that wonderful demonstration here. And we will see you back live at 1:15. See you then.